webinar on I Can't Save You and Don't Want to Die Trying the American Fire Culture with Dr. Burt Clark. I am excited that Dr. Clark agreed to do this webinar with us. He has challenged me as well as the fire service over the years to think differently, to think outside the box, but also to look at what we do and how we do it. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. But a couple of the housekeeping kind of thing before I turn it over to Dr. Clark. We're doing voice over IP technology through your computer speakers or headset. Make sure they're turned on, the volume is turned up. Your microphones have been muted, so you don't have to worry about saying something that the whole world can see or hear that you may regret or not want them to hear. There are handouts. The PowerPoint will be on, in the handout. We will take questions and answers at the end. So if you have them, go ahead and send them to the chat room for the questions and answers at the end. Dr. Clark will be glad to answer those for you as well. What is the VCOS doing? These webinars are sponsored by VCOS, the Volunteer and Combination Officer section of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and we're a busy section. We've been stuck around 2,400 members for the last 10 years, but we've been consistent in getting good renewals of members. But what are we doing? What are we doing to help the fire service and help you? We have a chaplain guide out there for local fire departments. If you need or want to look at your chaplain program and see how it coincides with the guide that we wrote, we know that with the behavioral wellness issues that we have in the fire service today, I'm pretty blunt in saying it's traumatic brain injuries, not the same way you get a concussion on football, but it is about traumatic brain injuries. And we know that our firefighters need help. Suicide is a leading cause of firefighter death and injury here in the fire service. We're looking at branding. We're looking at how we can market. We've increased the webinars as one example. Instead of doing one once a month, we're doing quite a few more of those because you all are attending. Most of our webinars will have 50 or more in attendance. Of all the ones, I think we've scheduled 10 of them. We've only canceled one for lack of attendance. So we're pretty happy about that. Well, the VCOS wants to increase membership. And so if you're not a member, and you don't have to be a member to attend this webinar, if you're not a member, we certainly would encourage you to consider joining the International Association of Fire Chiefs and join the VCOS as a section. Our flagship event is Symposium in the Sun 2023. That program has been going on since 1999. We've been sold out for the last 8 years. If you've not been to Symposium in the Sun, we encourage you to go look at the program, look at the speakers, look at the topics, and see if indeed you wouldn't like to go to Clearwater Beach at the Hilton Resort in November of 2023. How bad can that be? Think about that. Well, come on, number 5. And other things the VCOS is doing is we're looking at ribbon reports, our newsletter, increasing our newsletter, trying to put more content into that, social media. I already mentioned webinars. We are developing a critical thinking boot camp, maybe called something a little bit different than that, for 2023, so that we can help educate current and future leaders of the volunteer and combination fire service. And then we're also marketing of our course deliveries. If you've not looked at our courses, the different ones that we have that we can come to your facility and present them on a regional basis, we certainly encourage you to do that. Transitioning from an all volunteer to a combination system, how to organize and guide your fire department, recruitment and retention are just a couple of the topics that are out there. So again, think about that. Look that up on our website as well. And I just got to find a way to hit that button. All right. What are some of the upcoming events, the webinars that are upcoming here? A good picture of that. You can go to our website and do a search on VCOS webinars, and you can get those. But again, we have quite a few of those coming up as well. All right. Now it's time for John to be quiet and let Dr. Clark speak. I don't even want to introduce him because most of you probably are attending because you know him. He was my first instructor back in 1984 at the National Fire Academy. My first visit there. I had Dr. Clark and gosh, now I'm draw a blank on Bert on his
Bert Felt.
yeah. So we had two people. So, but Dr. Clark has been around, and like I said, he's written a couple books. You'll see an offer from him about his book at the end of the presentation. But he's also he just thinks a little differently, and nothing wrong with that. So we're going to have an interesting conversation today, and let's get started. So Dr. Clark, it's all up to you. I've got to the
Thanks,
contents
John.
slide.
Well, do you have the opening slide with a picture of the book? I'd like to talk about that for a minute.
Oh, I can back up. Yes, sir.
So
it's there.
You can see the cover, right, John? That's
yes,
got
sir.
the rock on it. That's got the rock on it. Well, I mean, the cover I chose this time is really part of the story, because on the National Fire Academy there are 3 fire service monuments, and the rock was the first one that was ever erected, and that was put up in 1979 on the dedication of the National Fire Academy by Jimmy Carter. He was the president at the time, and I was there that day when we had the dedication of the National Fire Academy. So it's not very pretty. It doesn't have any lights on it at night. Doesn't have any flags around it. It's just a rock with a plaque. But over the years, John, I mean, that rock is really was my whole purpose for being at the Fire Academy and what it was trying to do. Public Law 93-498 is the one that created the U.S. Fire Administration National Fire Academy. And basically, the rock says the purpose of the Fire Academy is to increase the professionalism of the fire service and others engaged in fire prevention and control activities. So that was kind of our mantra in terms of why the Academy came to existence and why it's there. Over the years, the next monument that was built was the Fallen Firefighters Monument and the creation of the National Fallen Firefighters organization. And that actually is a federal monument, very much on the same category as the Washington Monument. So that's the level of political support there is for that. The final monument was the 9/11 statue that was placed there. There's even a story behind that. So when people come to visit the Academy, they go to the Fallen Firefighters Memorial and they go to the 9/11 Memorial, but rarely, if ever, do they ever go to the rock. And therein lies part of our challenge. We are very good at memorializing people that die, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's not the only thing that we should hold up as our standard of success. So in the beginning of the book, there's I wrote a poem about those 3 monuments, and the idea is, you can go pay respects, but then also stop by the rock that is really our purpose for being. Our purpose for being is to not accept death, to not see it as something heroic, to see it as something to avoid, to stop from happening. And I think that's fundamental to the direction society needs to go in the 21st century. When a civilian dies, it's not an act of God, and when a firefighter dies, it's not part of the job. Something went wrong. And if we keep using God and heroism as justification for these terrible losses, we'll never solve the problem. So talk about thinking outside the box. That's why I changed the title of the book to "I Can't Save You and I Don't Want to Die Trying." Dying should not be what we consider part of the job. That's not to say it's not going to happen. When you get in an airplane and fly someplace, there's the possibility that you may die, but death is not something that the airplane industry or society accepts. We don't accept that. So we do everything we can to stop it. But until we have that same gut level belief that when somebody dies in a fire, it's not an act of God, and when a firefighter dies, it's not part of the job, we're going to be playing catch up all the time, John. So that's my opening comment. Do you have any comments on that, John? John, are you there? Hello, John. Are you there,
I'm sorry,
John?
I'm unmuted. I got rid of most of my background noise. So when you look at firefighters' death, and I realize that what Dr. Clark has said, and maybe what I'm going to say is probably going to be a little bit, make people a little uncomfortable or maybe even angry. But in most cases, we die because we're trying to save a building. We're not trying to save lives of human beings. I'm not going to get into the argument of abandoned versus vacant versus got to do the primary search, that sort of thing, but it is when you look at and you analyze the firefighters who die, what were they doing and why were they doing it? So that's part of that conversation about the American fire culture. What do we believe and how do we act? So I think that's some part of what we're going to talk about today. So ready for the next slide, Dr. Clark?
Absolutely, absolutely. So basically what the book is about, John, is my journey in the fire service from 1970 to actually today, because I can't not think about the fire service. So this book is certainly a collection of those thoughts. And my publisher was able to put it into a natural order of things and into big categories. So you can see the categories there are culture. There's a whole section on culture. And what drove that, we all live in a culture. We grow up in a culture. Culture is why we do what we do. So the better we understand culture, the better we can help understand why we behave the way we do, why we feel the way we do, and then most importantly, how do we change? How do we change our culture? Because culture does change. So that chapter is all about that. The next one is about seatbelts. So the seatbelt chapter and the Mayday chapter are really micro and macro case studies of culture, looking at those two behaviors. And then we go on to best practices. When you and I first came in, John, we're doing stuff a lot different than we did then. So when I came in 1970, the National Fire Academy didn't even exist. So that vision of the National Fire Academy, that was going to be a best practice, but we didn't even know it. People were working on it. So when you came in 1984, John, that was because you were going to someplace to learn the best practice in 1984. And the Fire Academy was trying to give you that. It wasn't the way New York City did it. It wasn't the way Los Angeles did it. It was supposedly the best practice we could find at the time. And that's what the Fire Academy tried to do, was set up to do, and I think continues to do to this day, is to push the envelope on what do we mean by best. And in the notion of higher education, from a human standpoint, humanity has progressed over the years. And I think one of the main reasons we do that is because of our ability to learn from the past, to learn from the present, and then communicate that into the future for the next generation to find new ideas, to find new answers, find new solutions. And it's that education infrastructure that we've created as humans that allow that to happen. And so that's why that higher education model, I think, is so important. And then finally, speeches. As you and I both know, John, you can't get to be president of the IAFC if you can't give a speech. Because public speaking is what ignites people's vision to your vision, what encourages people to follow you, even when I don't have to. Whether it's the I have a dream speech, or ask not what your country can do, ask what you can do for your country, or 7 years ago. I mean, all of those people were able to rally people behind them because of their ability to speak. But the challenge there is, when you do public speaking and you try to rally, you have to reveal who you are. And it's up to the followers to decide whether or not to follow you. So that's risk-taking. You know, it's not cutting deals behind the scene. It's not political power. It's visionary power. So speeches are that, and so some of my best speeches are in there in terms of how I've tried to shape the fire service with my vision. So anyway, that's slide one, John. Any comments?
Well, I know you're going to elaborate on the seatbelts, but for those that for the younger people on this on the webinar, seatbelts, we have good seatbelt policies because of Dr. Clark's seatbelt pledge, and so we're going to talk about that. But when you look at the topics that we want to talk about today, is again, we just give you a snippet of some of the things that we've experienced, some of the things that we know we can improve upon. So with that, Dr. Clark, we'll go to the next slide. Before you go, Dr. Clark, I should say, I forgot to do this at the very beginning. Dr. Clark had technological problems getting online, so that's why you have to look at me and listen to Dr. Clark.
Yeah, apparently I live out in the country, John, and we don't, apparently I don't have good enough Wi-Fi. When we tested it a couple of weeks ago, it worked fine, but today it's not worth the darn, so it's all about technology. But giving credit to us firefighters, we figured a way around it, so we're still doing it. So nobody's losing anything, you just can't see me. Okay, the next slide is about fire culture. And this may be, there's something like 56 essays in the book that I've written over my time span. And this is one of the largest modules. And the impetus for this, in terms of understanding the whole construct of culture, John, you were probably at the first Everyone Goes Home conference down in Florida, right? Years ago?
Yep, Tampa one, yep.
Yeah, Tampa one, yeah. So I was you may have been in my group. I was in the group that looked at culture. And I had like 60 or 70 people in there. I had Brunacini in there. You know, I had Billy Goldfeder in there. I had all the big name people. It's like herding cats. But at the end of that, we came up with number one. The number of the 16 life safety initiatives, that group came up with number one, about addressing the culture in the fire service. And that really captured everything that room could come up with. So from that time on, I became obsessed with looking at culture and going back and understanding it from both a theoretical and an academic standpoint. That's when I took classes from Dr. Edgar Schein at MIT, because he was a guru on organizational culture, to really understand what is culture and then how do we change it. So using the Schein model, in that chapter, I explain basically culture in terms of the who, what, when, where, how, and why of everything we do. Is culture answers those questions, and you have to dig deep to understand the answers to those questions. Some of them are easy. For example, Dr. Schein talks about 3 levels of culture. He talks about the artifacts. Those are the things we can see and touch and use. Fire trucks, fire hose, the gear we use. And the example I use is that, in the beginning, firefighters used to run to the fire, literally with buckets. That was the bucket brigade, right before there was anything. Then they used hand-drawn carts. Then they used horses to draw it. But the notion was you had to be fast, because if you didn't react fast, consequently, fire would progress and the town could burn down. So those are the artifacts. And then there's the espoused beliefs. That's the rules and regulations we put down. Most every state has laws that allow firefighters to exceed the speed limit, because the notion is we got to be fast, right? And
Yes.
then some states, at one time, there were 19 states. Hopefully this changed. But if there's a young student out there looking for a project, go back and look. At one time, there were 19 states that specifically exempted firefighters from wearing their seatbelts because they had to be set fast. Hopefully some of that's changed. But can you imagine that the state law would exempt firefighters from wearing their seatbelt? That's crazy. So now we still think we need to be fast. And we're still not putting our seatbelt on because we think we need to be fast. I just had a very high-ranking retired chief officer from Metro Fire Department tell me that seatbelts are important, but he can still understand why the busy engine company first doing a box alarm would not take the time to put their seatbelt on. He said, okay, if your fourth due, I can see it, but the first due is too busy to put their seatbelt on. So we still have not broken that simple little notion of I have to be fast, so fast that I don't have time to put my seatbelt on to race to this person's house. And so that's how powerful culture can be. When we know that physics does not play when you're a firefighter. I think just recently there was a fire truck, blew a red light, ran into a building, firefighters were hurt, and their justification was they always run this fast because they're, a first due company a lot, and that's the way they behave. Well, there's going to be lots of lawsuits over that one. And so if we need to be honest about this culture stuff and how it impacts our behavior. And then the other argument is, if fast is so important, why hasn't the fire service come out in 100 support for residential sprinkler ordinances? We are not putting all of our political capital behind residential sprinkler ordinances. Still, Maryland, Washington, D.C., and California are the only three entities that have mandatory residential sprinkler ordinances for all new single-family dwellings. And we know there's nothing faster than a sprinkler head. So that's our dysfunction. Fast by itself isn't bad, but if we only think of fast riding on a fire truck, that's the dysfunctional part. If we're not willing to say fast is also a sprinkler head, and that can do a much better job than I can as a firefighter, that's not being honest. So, and then past, present, and future, we're talking about the present today, John. The article is about the past, but everybody listening to this, sometime in your career, you will have to make a decision in terms of how am I doing it today? Am I doing it 100% right 100% of the time? And can I do it better the next time? You have the opportunity to do that on every shift. On every shift, you can do something better, right? And it may not be, one more rep on the barbells. It may be going out and knocking on a door to see if they've got a working smoke detector in their house. That's the change, right?
Yes.
And that's the tough change, right? Just today on my Facebook, Paul Combs put out a thing about aggressive firefighters, right? And he had this whole story about how this fire chief was saying, yeah, we're an aggressive fire department, and I've had to replace 5 helmets this year because the helmets were thermally impacted. That was the fire chief's big brag about how great his fire department was, because his guys were so aggressive, they damaged their helmets. Well, my question was, ask the fire chief, how many homes did they inspect to make sure they got working smoke detectors? How many smoke detectors did you install? Are you aggressive when it comes to actually saving people's lives with smoke alarms? That's I'm not bad mouthing for one thing. I'm asking him to think about it a different way. You can be aggressive, making sure people don't die by making sure they got working smoke detectors too. That's how powerful culture is. Don't tell me how many helmets you melt. Tell me how many smoke alarms you installed. Comments, John?
Yeah, I would. Lots of comments, Dr. Clark. This is a big issue for me as well. Is that, and for those of you that like to read books, I would encourage you to go get the book Bochy Ball, Bochy Ball, The Chemistry of Winning and Losing in Baseball, Business, and Life. It is about the San Francisco Giants and Bruce Bochy, who was the coach. And he didn't talk about changing culture. He talked about changing the chemistry of all those egos, and I'm EGO, in order for them to win Super Bowls, in order for them to win the World Series, and how he changed their way of thinking. Some of the same things that we got to do in the fire service. I encourage you to, if you're interested in learning more about culture, to go get that book. Dr. Clark used the word "but," and I used that in capital letters. I was actually I'm recovering from back surgery, and I was saying how I feel good, and I'm going to beat this, but I used the word but it's going to take a while, and I got to be patient. And I had a friend of mine say, quit using the word but. You're making an excuse. And so when we use the word but, we're making excuses for why we do what we do. And in many cases, if I was to ask you why do we do what we do, you would not have a very good answer for that. When you look at time, when you argue about, well, we can't buckle our seatbelts because it's about time. Well, our job in the fire department, our mission is to save lives and protect buildings. Buildings is number 2. Saving lives is number 1. If you do not actively check smoke detectors on every call that you go into somebody's house, you're not working the best you could to save lives. If you as a firefighter don't have a 9-volt battery in your fire coat pocket, so when you find a dead smoke detector, you can replace that battery. Or at the very best, have a detector on the fire truck. You can get free detectors from many, many different places. You can apply for an AFG grant. You can get the American Red Cross to give you smoke detectors. You might even be able to get some local retailer to give you a few smoke detectors to put on your engine. But if we're looking at how we change the way we're thinking, we've got to change to where we are thinking about how do we save lives? How do we proactively save lives? Because it's not about the status quo. That's where I think we're saying, well, it's worked pretty well for us so far, and we accept the status quo as the way it should be tomorrow. Dr. Clark talked about past, present, and future. Yep, the present is where we are right this minute. But what is where we're going to be at in the future? How are we going to improve our value to our citizens? And who's responsible for it? You can say, well, the citizen's responsible for putting a smoke detector in their house. Yep, I agree with that. But we are in the business of saving lives. Think about it from that standpoint. What do we do? We're going on a medical run. Grandma fell and can't get up, or grandma's got, problems. She can't breathe. One of your firefighters should go check that smoke detector and make sure that it works, because grandma is sick. And if she had a fire, she probably couldn't get out of bed in order to save herself. And by the time the fire department gets there, by the time the first due engine in most cases get there, she will be dead. I'm not saying we don't do dramatic rescues, but the vast majority of the time when we arrive on a scene, that person, if they're still in that house and not hanging out the window, they're deceased. That's it for me, Dr. Clark.
Okay. So that was the culture. Now this one is about seatbelts, and it's a case study about the social, political, economic, and technological. So if a fire department tells me what a great fire department they are, and how stringent, strict they are, I ask them, okay, when was the last time you disciplined anybody for not having their seatbelt on? Well, never. Do you have 100% seatbelt compliance? No. well, then you are letting people violate their own SOPs and there's no consequences. You know, I see a direct connection between seatbelt enforcement and all the other kind of things. How many times when you read the NIOSH reports, well, they didn't do a 360. Well, somebody died this time, but you're damn well sure they didn't do 360s before. So the seatbelt thing is just an example of why you have to perform every task 100% right, 100% of the time by all the members. You can't be a profession if you think you have the right to pick and choose what you will follow and what you won't follow. That's the exact opposite of what a profession is. Can you imagine going in for surgery like you did, Chief, and the physician say, well, today I'm not going to wear rubber gloves? Nobody would allow that to happen. And in that case, only John dies. But when you don't have your seatbelt on, you die. So I mean, that shows you the dysfunctionality of people thinking I have the right to decide how I'm going to behave. Nobody does CPR their own way. Everybody does CPR the exact same way because that's the way to do it. But why can't everybody wear their seatbelt? You know, but it goes to that culture stuff because we think we need to be fast and we think the risk is acceptable and nobody holds us accountable for that. So that's why seems like a simple thing, but we haven't solved that problem yet, John.
And your comments about seatbelts, it's sad that we're still even talking about this 25 years after we had the seatbelt pledge, but I just finished an article for Fire Rescue One on leaders fail. And my point is that we fail as leaders when we don't enforce the rules consistently. As you said, Dr. Clark, it's like, oh, well, it's Tuesday. We don't have to follow rules 3, 7, and 9.
Right.
And on Wednesday, we don't have to follow rules 1, 2, and 4. No. Right. Chief Brunacini said, and I believe this, try to get your rules down to one page. These are the big rules. Wear your seatbelt. Stop at all controlled intersections. Wear your SCBA in the hot zone, so on and so forth. Yes, we're going to have other rules, so on and so others, but what are the big 10? One page, yep. 100% compliance with the big 10. You could say 12. I've said this in class before, and I'd be glad to share the 10 that I made up for my fire department. I'll get that to the handout section, but it's like these are the ones that no matter what, you are not allowed to not use them. And then as the leader, if you don't do it, I'm going to discipline not only the person who violated the rule, but I'm going to discipline the person who supervised the firefighter yes. who let them violate the rule. And that's where, Dr. Clark, I see the challenge for the fire services. And in my article, I come from the volunteer fire service. That's my area. And it's about being popular. I was asked many, many years ago by a former fire chief, would you rather be respected or liked? And I can tell you, after having give the helmet to at least two families after a firefighter died, not in the line of duty, but on active duty, giving the helmet to the family is the hardest thing in the world you will ever do. And trying to make them feel better because you gave them a helmet, but their firefighter is not here anymore and won't ever be here anymore. So yep. Think about those changes and how you don't want to feel that guilt. As the officer, you need to enforce the rules, all of the rules, all of the time. Dr. Clark?
Absolutely. Next slide, Mayday. Mayday, again, Mayday is the other kind of case study. And I consider like the seat belts on one end of the spectrum and Mayday on the other. One thing you got to do every day, the other thing you may never, ever have to do. But like both of them are like really important, you know, and you need to be 100% confident in your ability to do those things. And And this came about because, I don't think the story's in there, but I was a company officer, captain on a ladder truck, and I lost track of some of my guys, but I didn't think it was that bad, so I never called the Mayday. And I came back and realized, why didn't I call the Mayday? That's when I went into our material and realized I had never actually practiced making the decision to call the Mayday. I was the training officer, so I said, okay, you call Mayday, and we exercise the RIT team. But that exercise, the part of it, it didn't exercise the first step. So that's when I started my research in terms of how do we train about this and how do we change our standards, and the whole Mayday training came about at the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor level. And that affective domain, saying it's okay for me to call Mayday, I shouldn't be ashamed of myself. If jet fighter pilots can eject, we can have firefighters call Mayday, right? And then the whole series of individually, organizationally, and the whole discipline. Because if you remember, Chief, in the beginning, the NFPA standard said firefighters can't use the word Mayday because it will interfere with airplanes and ships at sea. And I got a letter from the National Emergency Radio Communication people, federal agency, federal committee, and they said, no, Bert, the firefighters can use it, and we recommend that NFPA change their standards. Well, I got that letter from them like in 2002. I sent it to NFPA, got no reply. A bunch of people tried to get it fixed, but it wasn't until 2010 or 2012 that the IAFF was the only organization that could get the NFPA to change its standard to allow firefighters to use the word Mayday. It took 10 years to change one word. Wow. That's how tenacious you have to be when you're trying to do the right thing. You can't give up. And you need to find supporters out there to help you achieve what your goals are. And it took 10 years. So that's a great case study in terms of how to do that. And that process is contained in that chapter. And even today, we're much better. So Mayday is part of the normal standard now. A lot of people practice it, but we can always do it better and more of it. And so that's the Mayday model.
Now, I would hope that all of you do practice calling a Mayday, and practice calling it on the radio. Don't practice calling it in the classroom. Make sure that you do it on the radio, because there's a different feeling. I've been on the scene of 4 Maydays in which I was there taking pictures, but still to hear that come over the radio, it just makes your stomach just fall straight to the ground. That, oh my God! Now all the firefighters got out, no serious injuries, but they got out. Then my fire department actually had a Mayday. Well, the other part about calling the Mayday, it's not always the firefighter who calls the Mayday. In a couple of cases where I was on scene with photographs, and in my fire department, it was the incident commander called a Mayday because they were trying to find the interior firefighters and they didn't answer their radio.
Yeah.
And in my department's case, my department was criticized because the incident commander called the Mayday. And I told some of these guys, what do you mean? Who do you want to call the Mayday? When the interior crew will not answer the radio, you've had an explosion, backdraft.
Yep.
And nobody's answering the radio. Well, somebody better call a Mayday because we need help. We got to go find them. But look at your Mayday training procedures. You want to know more about my fire department's Mayday? If you go to Rich Gasaway's situational awareness website and look up webinars, we did a webinar with the incident commander. And I will tell you, my incident commander called Mayday like 12 times. And he said, basically, he was saying, I was begging these guys, just answer me. Tell me something. And they didn't. They weren't injured. They had lost their radio. Well, instead of putting their radio in the pocket, they attached it to the outside of the pocket, and they were doing ceiling pulls, knocked the radio out of attached to the pocket on the ground, and didn't know it.
There you go. And make
So-
sure when you're doing that, when you're exercising your Mayday stuff, make sure you include communications operators, the radio operators on the other end, because they can be a valuable resource to that whole Mayday system.
Yep. All right, I'm moving to slide 12, sir.
All right, number 12, best practice. This visual is you'll recognize it as the standard normal distribution. From most of us are in the middle. That's the norm, and in the outside, the pioneers or the people that are stuck in the paralysis. And that has changed so many times in my time in the fire service, and it's continually going to change. So the idea is, if you're looking at this, in that chapter, there's a lot of examples of what I consider to be best practices and how they came about. So, but everybody that reads it, you have to come up with your own. What do you think are best practices? And where are you on this spectrum? Everybody can be a pioneer. For example, I was the first guy in the whole DC Fire Department in 1973 at an NFPA at a FDIC conference. I saw a Nomex hood for the first time. I bought one, and I started wearing it in DC. And you can imagine they didn't talk about how brave I was because I had this hood on. They called me everything but brave. But what happened? Some of the guys on the heavy duty rescue squad, the Supermen, they said, "Clark, where'd you get that?" So I showed it to them on the label on the inside, and they wrote to the company and bought their own. Everybody stopped picking on me when the squad guys started wearing them. So we can, that was me being the pioneer. Now on the other side, when I first came in the fire service and got to be a driver, my officers would yell at me because I wasn't driving fast enough. I followed the rules. No more than 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. And I followed the rules. And they got mad at me. So I was the bad guy in their eyes because everybody else was, Katie, bar the door, we're going like crazy. I said, no. So sometimes you can go against the norm because everybody's doing it, but just because they're doing it doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. Yeah. So, and sometimes I'm just a follower. I just go along. So we all have that ability within us if we allow ourselves to see it and we're committed to it. And you can do it today. You can, like Chief Buckman said, you can put that 9-volt battery in your coat today and carry it and change it every so often. So if there's somebody with no battery in their smoke detector, you take it out and put it in, and now next thing you know, the other guys on your shift will be doing the same thing or something. Or you can start wearing your seatbelt. It's a simple act of putting your seatbelt on. Or you can be the driver that says, that damn Clark guy, he made me feel so guilty. We're not moving this fire truck until everybody's seated and belted. And if you're the driver, you got lots of power. They can't make you move that fire truck unless everybody's seated. And guess what? They will learn how to be seated and belted. So, yeah, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can just be a little thing. But if you're the only one doing it, and it's the right thing to do, you're a pioneer. You're trying to change that culture. So that's what that model's all about. That's what that one's all about, Chief. Best practices.
All right. You want to move to slide 13? I don't have anything to add on this one.
Okay. Higher education. What do you think of that picture, Chief?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good picture.
Pretty
pictorial for the issue.
Yeah, and that's what I try to do. How do I capture one thing? Well, for those that have never seen it, back when I was just a young lad, Voyager 1 was sent out into outer space, and it finally left our solar system. And Carl Rogers, is that who it was? He said, "Turn it around and let's take the last picture of Earth." So you can see the heart in the center of that is a pale blue dot in the vastness of space, and that's Earth. So everything we worry about when looked at from the vastness of space is irrelevant. We aren't even a speck in anybody's eye compared to space. But at the same time, we took the picture. So that's pretty damn cool to know that we are basically nothing. You know, we're the only ones that know that. So that's the yin and the yang of it. You know, we know we are nothing, but we took the picture of it. And that's because of higher education. Humans have been able to figure this out, to take a selfie, you know, that far away. I mean, holy crap. How cool is that? But it's that higher education stuff that allows us to do that. And the fire service has not grasped the importance of the academic and the higher education infrastructure, because that's where the new knowledge, the new insight is created. The fire service has been reactive to everything because we don't look ahead. We're reactive today. When the bell hits, we respond. But true professions are always looking ahead. So that's a major paradigm shift we have to have. And let me give you an example. At MIT, there's this professor. Let me get that this way. Right now, everybody's worried about electric vehicle fires, right? Or electric scooter fires. That's our big concern today, right? That's our big issue. That's the big issue today. But lithium batteries were created in the 1960s. Why weren't we worried about them in 1960? Well, because we weren't at the table when they were being created, right? The union, the IFF just put in a lawsuit against NFPA because of PFAS, right? The forever chemicals in the barrier. Well, we're still playing catch up. They knew that this stuff caused cancer a long time ago. So why weren't we at the table thinking about it then? Because we did not have anybody in the fire business in that sandbox when they were creating this stuff. Because there were no PhD students studying the fire service at those universities. Well, it continues. For example, MIT last year created this new product that they make it in a petri dish or something. I don't know, they grow it or something they created. Some kind of molecular kind of thing that they create. And up until now, they didn't think it was possible. But this professor finally cracked the code how to make this stuff. Well, the stuff turns out to be as light as plastic, but stronger than steel. And in the article, it said, could be used to coat telephones, cell phones, or could even be used in building construction. So the first thing that went through my mind is, what the hell happens when you light it on fire? They are creating a building material that's lighter than plastic and stronger than steel. Now, maybe nobody on this call is going to have to deal with it, but somebody 50 years from now is going to be dealing with this shit, going to a building fire. And so how many other of those kinds of challenges are going to be out there? And until we as a discipline get out of our firehouse and realize we need to go play in somebody else's sandbox. Who is the firefighter walking around MIT lighting shit on fire to see what happens to it? As goofy as that sounds, that's how my brain thinks, right? There was another case at MIT where this professor built a building inside of a building, and the building was built by silkworms. It was a geodesic dome shape, and they put silkworms in it, and they made the structure inside another structure. And I thought, I wonder if that was flammable. I have no idea. So our future problem is being created today in this whole world of higher education, and we're not there. We're more worried about what's the big city fire department doing. You know, I want to be like the big city. That's okay, but somebody's got to go hang out at MIT and Harvard to find out what problem they're creating for us. So that's my pitch about higher education, Chief.
Well, and although I don't know that Dr. Clark and I have had this argument about higher education, but Dr. Dennis O'Neill, former superintendent of the National Fire Academy, he and I used to have this argument about higher education. Yes, we do need higher education. We do need a fire chief to have a certain level of degrees, but we also need to be lifelong learners. I also encourage you to read books not in the fire service. Yes, I have authors that I'm fans of, but I'm not going to tell you who those are. If you want to know, I'll be glad, send me an email and be glad to share that with you. But read things that are not associated with the fire service. Read what business is doing. How are businesses surviving? In my opinion, I failed to motivate the International Association of Fire Chiefs during COVID to have a think tank of 10 or 12 non-fire service people to come and look at the opportunity that COVID presented to the fire service. And instead, we were reactive. In my opinion, we weren't proactive. We were reacting to all the challenges that associate with that, but we weren't looking at, well, what happens when COVID is over? How do we continue to make the fire service important to the community? Because we're very important to the communities during COVID. In most cases, we're the only ones who had come knock on their door when they asked for emergency help somewhere. So it's not just about the college degrees, in my opinion. It is about that lifelong learning attitude and reading stuff that's not associated with the fire service. Dr. Clark, next slide.
Next slide is the speeches. There's some of my speeches in there, like the first speech I ever gave in 1977 at the NFPA conference in Washington, D.C. on think about your own safety. And so I've been thinking about this for a long time, that, so the whole idea that when a firefighter is injured or killed is not part of the job. And I'm still there, because that's not the norm today. We still think of it that way. And one of my controversial articles I ever wrote was we should do away with the term line of duty death. We should call them occupational fatalities. They're occupational fatalities. Line of duty death has indicates to me that dying is part of the job. They died in the line of duty. No, they died because something went wrong. This is an occupational fatality. Occupational fatalities are not supposed to happen. And that's a very tough pill to swallow, and it goes at our culture of hero stuff, and that doesn't help us. That puts us at risk of doing things that we should not be doing, and so that's hard to discuss, but that's in there, And then what does it mean to be a firefighter? How do you have what matters in the fire service? So there's a series of speeches in there that I gave, and probably one of the toughest speeches I ever gave. They asked me to do the memorial speech at the Ohio Fire Chiefs Memorial Service. And knowing how I think about fire deaths, or firefighter fatalities and stuff, it really challenged me to come to grips with my own understanding of what that means. And I think if you read that speech, you will get my essence of it. I never used the word hero in there because it's not heroic to die doing your job. Something went wrong. It's certainly tragic, and you feel a loss that I can't imagine, because I've never lost a firefighter. I've never been connected with a firefighter fatality. But my wife died in November of last year, and I never felt that much loss in my life losing my wife. So until I experienced it, I did not know I could have that much grief. So I can't imagine the grief that a parent or a spouse would have losing their loved one. And nothing we can do can bring them back, but we can do stuff from keeping it happening again. And that doesn't mean we don't love them or mourn them, but it was not part of the job, and we can do better. So in a nutshell, Chief, that's what that one's about. So there's also one more slide about how your readers or listeners today can get a copy of the book.
I was going to say something about speeches, though. My speeches are not in there, but probably one of the worst events dealing with death, a firefighter death. This is after a firefighter death in a residential structure fire, where when I was the state fire academy director, that was one of my duties, was to coordinate the burial of firefighters who died in the line of duty. And in this case, it was a huge house, 8,000 square foot, three levels. When I walked up, saw the chief, said hi, did a few briefing kind of things, and I said, "Chief, what did it look like when you got here?" And he said, "We had fire coming up over the back of the roof." So from the front of the building, they could see fire coming up over the back. So I said, "So what was on fire in the back?" And he goes, "I never made it back there." And I thought, wow, you sent people, firefighters, two firefighters in the front of the building. You don't know what's going on in the back. It's a 8,000 square foot house. You're in a rural area. You don't have any water, and one firefighter died. The bad part about that event was that night when we're doing a debriefing, I think it was actually the next night, we did a debriefing with the family. I'm up there speaking, and this female gets up and says, "Why do firefighters always have to go inside?" I don't know what I answered her. Obviously, according to the state fire marshal, I gave a fairly good answer that shut her down and didn't have her ask the second question of, like, you didn't answer the question why. And but she had, it wasn't her husband that died, but it was one of her husband's brother firefighters. And it was like, I'm standing there when she asked that question, like, what do I say? And like I said, I do not remember what I said, but obviously it wasn't too bad because we didn't get a lot of political heat over it. So with that, Dr. Clark, going to the next slide.
And that's should be the last one about the book.
Yes, sir.
My publisher, if there's a phone number there, you can call the number. They'll give you a book. The price is there. They'll donate $5 to the Cancer Network, and I'll sign the book for you. So they will send me the mailing stuff and your name and address, and then I'll sign the book for you and get you a copy of my book. I've got like 80 copies of the book here that I can do that. So 80 copies? Yeah, I think I got 80 copies. And so the first 80 people that get that can get a signed copy of my book. And there you go.
Well, that's quite an offer. I realize it's $35 plus shipping, but you're going to get your shipping covered. And,
yep.
So I encourage you to get the book. I encourage you not only to get the book, but to get it, read it, and then share it. Whether you share the book with them, with your other firefighters, or you share pieces of the book with them. Do a 30-minute officer presentation on some of the things that are in the book. Yes, I like to read. It's sort of funny. I told Dr. Clark, I don't read books normally. I read a book, I open it up to whatever page I open it up to, and that's where I start reading. When I get bored, I close the book, I come back to it later, and I may start at a different page. I know that's weird, but that's how I read books. Because for me, reading books from cover to cover was boring, and I don't like to read boring books, or I don't like to spend my time being bored. So, but I am a big believer in books and sharing of information, and so I encourage you to look at that. Take Dr. Clark up on his special offer. So with that, I want to thank Dr. Clark. I had a couple other slides to close up here with, but I hope that the attendees feel like I do, that Dr. Clark has said some things in here that hopefully challenge you to your way of thinking, and will help you organize your fire department in a little better way. So so for that, the presentation is over. Just two little housekeeping slides. This has been recorded. You will get a link in your email that includes the link, so you can share this with people who weren't here. You can use it at an officers meeting if you'd like. Like I said, you can make stuff up, buy the book, and use stuff from the book to talk about. And then you'll also get a survey. Please tell us what you thought about today's presentation, and please make suggestions on future webinars that you'd like to hear a specific speaker on, or a specific topic. So with that, I will say thank you very much for everybody who's attending. And if we have any questions, I don't know. Nan is on there. She's our behind the scenes person looking for questions. Do we have any questions, Nan? I don't see her popping up with any questions. Let me just look here. Okay, here we go. Hold on, Dr. Clark. Nope, we have no questions. Well, again, let's sign off here. Thank you all very much. We went a couple minutes over. We started a couple minutes late because John was late getting online before the presentation was supposed to start. But thank you all very much for coming, and be safe out there. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Bye.